Some of our greatest writers have been some of our greatest drunks and alcoholics. And I don't know why, when it comes to literary giants and greats, that their alcoholism has been so romanticized. Is that what it has to be? Do you have to be a literary great in order for your alcohol consumption to have been romanticized? I don't know, but a lot of the greats were big drinkers, and they had their favorites. Ernest Hemingway had his mojito. Fitzgerald enjoyed the gin Ricky, and he liked gin because he thought if he drank gin, nobody could smell it on him. Wrong. Oscar Wilde favored absinthe, which explains a lot. When you get into the whiskey world a little bit, then it starts to get narrowed down a little. Hunter S. Thompson was a big fan of Wild Turkey. And as my producer, Greg Hansberry, reminded me, he would also like to go in the backyard and fire off a machine gun, which we're not doing tonight because I don't have a machine gun.
I'm out.
As if that's the biggest problem.
Let me go out to the car.
In that story. Charles Bukowski probably kept it the most simple. His favorite thing was the Boilermaker. Shot of whiskey and a beer. That simple. William Faulkner. Now that guy, also a whiskey drinker, he enjoyed the mint julep. And he drank it with, or made it, I should say, with the guest bottle that I'll introduce here in just a moment. There's some debate as to when Faulkner would drink. Some say he drank all the time. There's other stories that will tell you that when he was writing, he didn't drink at all. But when he was done writing for the day, that he would binge drink afterwards. And there's a great story about him when he went to Hollywood, because he's also responsible for some great screenplays. When Howard Hawks, the great director, hired him to write Road to Glory, he showed up at the meeting and had a brown paper bag. In that brown paper bag was a bottle of whiskey. While he was opening up the whiskey, he cut his finger or thumb while unscrewing the top and was bleeding profusely. And everybody thought, okay, this meeting is done. No, Faulkner simply took a waste can and brought it over to him and continued to bleed into the waste can while drinking the whiskey. The meeting went on as scheduled. Yeah. Maybe you have to be a literary great in order to have your alcohol consumption romanticized. And for some writers, it got way past whiskey. Supposedly, Stephen King has no recollection of how he created The Shining because he was throwing a lot of cocaine up his nose throughout the entire process. You know, some of it is myth, some of it's mythology, some of it's based in truth. I don't know why it's always alcohol, though. I can tell you this much. I know, and you know, that alcohol releases one's inhibitions. So maybe, and I'm just speculating, this isn't an answer, this is just an opinion, maybe for the writer, that's why they drink, because maybe it releases the creative inhibitions as well. Maybe they're not so judgmental about what they're putting down on the page when the alcohol starts to work as a muse. I don't know. So yeah, you're thinking, why are we talking about writers and alcohol? Well, that remains to be seen, won't it? Because I will make it all make sense by introducing the guest bottle for this evening. Another bottom shelf bottle, Heaven Hill. Why Heaven Hill? Heaven Hill was the go-to for William Faulkner when he made his mint juleps. He also drank Jack Daniels, but Jack Daniels was for medicinal purposes. Yeah, he would make a hot toddy, which John Whitney will tell you I know how to make. I believe I made him a couple of hot toddies.
Yes, you have.
With Jack Daniels when he wasn't feeling well. But he always says that when he would write, he would keep whiskey. He would write at night and would keep whiskey on hand and never too far away. And that's the truth. But like I said, there's some myth and mythology as to when he would drink and how much he would drink when he would do it. So the guest bottle, Heaven Hill, it's a bottom shelf bottle. But you know what? It's one of those bottom shelf bottles that ain't bad for the price, people. $12.95, $13 a bottle. From Bardstown, Kentucky, from Heaven Hill. It's been around since 1935, so it's got some legs and some history to it. And honestly, as far as bottom shelf whiskeys go, it's another one of those that ain't bad. It ain't bad. If you're looking for the cheap stuff that might get you through the night, or through that novel, or through that short story, or through that screenplay, whatever the case might be. Look to the heavens. Look to the heavens and see what might come of it. Before we get to our guest and tie this all together for you, hi, I'm Dino Tripodis. Welcome to Whiskey Business, a podcast not so much about whiskey as it is one with whiskey. Greg Hansberry, our audio producer, has a couple business things to shout out before we get started.
That's right. Subscribe to Whiskey Business on your favorite podcasting app. And if you're on iTunes, please rate and review us. That helps out a lot. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. We got John Whitney, our YouTube producer. YouTube. It's a Whiskey Business with Dino Tripodis.
Correct.
Subscribe and like us there. And we're on Twitter. You've got a new Twitter handle.
Whiskey Biz Show.
Whiskey Biz, B-I-Z show.
Yeah, Whiskey Biz Show,
And,
B-I-Z.
That's all I got.
That's enough.
I'm done.
That's enough. Our guest
Thank
bottle is Heaven Hill. Our guest, I love, and I was texting him earlier today, I love the whenever there's a little chance for a little serendipity, whenever we can connect the dots a little bit on Whiskey Business, we try to. I picked Heaven Hill because it was William Faulkner's go-to. Our guest tonight is William. He likes to be called Bill amongst his friends. William Farmer. William Faulkner. William Farmer. William Faulkner wrote great screenplays, The Big Sleep, To Have and Have Not.
I see what you're doing.
Road to Glory. William Farmer, Bill Farmer, also is a screenwriter extraordinaire, and he joins us tonight. Welcome, sir. And I hope you can appreciate the connections that I've tried to make here.
Bottom shelf whiskey for a bottom shelf guest. I love it.
I would not say a bottom shelf guest. Do you drink when you write?
I drink, and among other things, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, is that
not actually during the writing process.
So you don't drink during the writing
It's more
process.
like writing the night before, if you know what I mean. And then writing in my brain what I'm going to put down on the keyboard the next day.
Aren't you afraid you're going to lose it if you don't put it down immediately, or
it
something down?
It pretty much sticks there.
And that's when you're drinking is when you get the ideas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because once again, to bring up another famous writer, Ernest Hemingway, write drunk, edit sober, is what he used to say.
I'm kind of the opposite. Well, I think of fantastic things when I'm altered in some way, and the next morning, if they still sound good as I remember them, I'm like, yeah, that's it.
That's the way to go with it.
Yeah, that's the way I do it.
But you don't drink when you're writing.
No, I don't
Why?
usually.
Is it distracting for you?
It's almost a discipline thing. If I'm sitting there writing and I'm a little drunk, I'll just I'm gonna see what's on the Late Show, or I get it pulls me away. It's like my brain has to be totally focused on the writing when I'm actually physically putting the words down. But it's all a process. It's all writing. So what's going through my brain the night before, when I've maybe had a few of these, is like, oh, that's great stuff. That's great stuff. And it's like a little bit of freedom to probably come up with ideas that you wouldn't have come up with otherwise. But they stay with me, and I remember them the next day. So that's kind of the way I do it. It's a two-stage process.
I would lose them. And I'm, unfortunately, maybe once again, because I find it to be so romanticized through the years and the generations, I do drink when I write.
Yeah.
And not a lot.
No.
But it's, and I also smoke a lot when I drink. But once again, I light these, and they burn in the ashtray, so I probably get one or two drags. But it seems like it's part of the process. Is it really part of the process, or do I secretly want it to be part of the process? Because once again, I've romanticized what these famous writers did over the years.
It's part of your process.
And all the great works that they put out in the process.
Whatever works for you. It's part of your process. Yeah.
But you are in that rare air, my friend, where you are a successful screenwriter. You make a living.
Semi-successful.
No, you have made a living. You've been a screenwriter for how long?
Oh, about 20 years.
And that's been your
years.
job.
Yeah.
That's been it.
Yeah.
Sitting down.
Other than a few side things when money gets low.
Sure. But for the most part, and you have made your living being a screenwriter. Was that by choice? Was that the job that you wanted to do? Is that what you always imagined you would do?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when I was a little kid, it was always something about writing. You know, I can remember a time when I don't know if anybody remembers those things. I can't remember what they were called, like crash cars or something. They were an old toy, like in the 70s, where you put this car together, you wound it up,
Yeah.
you let it go, and when it hit a wall, it exploded into like 10 parts, and you put it back
The
together again.
doors would come off.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you'd
yeah.
Pop them back in. Yeah.
They had a contest at school when I was a little kid. It's like write an essay and win a crash car, you know. And it wasn't like, oh, gee, I hope I can win that car. It was like, oh, I guess I'll win that car, you know.
I will win that car.
and I won that car, you know.
What grade was this?
Oh, like second grade or
Second
something.
grade.
I can't remember what it was, but
And
I
you
mean,
were able to put the words together
and I don't even remember what it
enough
was.
to impress a teacher to go.
Yeah. I
"This
won
kid's got
I won the
something."
crash car.
You won the crash
I
car.
won the crash car.
So I was going to ask you, what's the first thing that you wrote that had merit? Would you consider that first essay to be it?
Probably, but I don't even remember what it was. I remember it was science fiction-y in some way, but I could not for the life of me tell you what it was.
And
Crash
is that
cars from outer
crash
space.
cars from outer space? Now, and is that the genre you prefer to write in?
Not really, but it seems to be the one that I've had the most, like the warmest reception with. You know, it's like I'll write various things that just come to mind, and you know, some of them get somewhere, some of them don't. But it seems like the ideas that get the most traction with other people are the science fiction-y, fantasy ideas. So I'm not sure it's my favorite thing, but it seems to be the thing I'm better at.
So, do you find yourself forcing or making yourself to write in that particular genre since you've had more success in it? And if you were being completely honest with yourself and you were sitting down to write a screenplay just for Bill Farmer, would it be science fiction or would it be something else?
It probably wouldn't be science fiction. And I've written a lot of screenplays that are just for William Farmer, and they're still
I know
in my computer or in a drawer somewhere. So
I know for a fact, and I don't mean to rain on parades, but John Whitney, who I work with on certain film projects, we were supposed to, and I still want to make that script.
Yep.
I still want to make that script.
Yep.
That started off as a short film, and
who's going to say the title?
Well, the original title was Solve for X.
Solve for X,
And the new title is Star and the Snowman.
Star and the Snowman. Yeah.
You know, it could go back to Solve for X.
And I always wanted to call it Steubenville.
Steubenville?
I always wanted to like set it, you know, like name the town.
Yeah.
You know, like forget it, Jake. It's
And talk about
Chinatown. You know, it's like-
serendipity. I mean, I grew up
from
in
Steubenville.
Steubenville.
Yeah.
I grew up
Yeah.
in Steubenville, and then like, okay, this takes place in Steubenville. And then I remember reading that script and said, oh God, I can't wait till we make this movie. And we were very close to starting that process. That's another story entirely. But we got sorely disappointed when financially things backed out. So that's my next question for you. The disappointment in this job of screenwriting.
Yeah.
I mean, you write something and someone takes an interest in it and you think it's a go and you're going to move forward and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with that?
You just get used to it because I mean it's hard. I mean, it's like in the early days of my writing, it was like, oh my God, I got, like, for example, my first, you know, quote unquote Hollywood job was Jonah Hex.
Right.
Which if you've ever seen that movie, don't. Which is kind of doesn't make much logical sense.
No,
but-
I'm going to because that was one of my topics tonight was that whole process.
But it's
go
like
ahead.
it's like when that first started, it was like, oh my God, I've got this job. I'm writing, you know, a big DC comic for Warner Brothers.
And this is before, we should tell people, this is before the comic universe.
Yeah,
in
it was
movies
just
was-
getting started.
it
They
was
were just starting to
yeah.
smell money off
Yeah,
comic books
it wasn't.
at that point.
It wasn't
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
is right now with
Yeah.
Justice League and all in the Marvel franchise.
Right.
This
And
was
Brie
early.
Larson.
This is early on.
Yeah.
In the process.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I got a Hollywood job. And it wound up, there's a long story. I mean,
Take your time.
Well, I mean, I could name names. I don't know if I should name names, but there's a whole soap opera of why the original Jonah Hex that I wrote and that I worked on with the producers didn't get made. And the project wound up getting shelved for years. And I thought, well, that's it. It's gone, you know. And then years later, it was revived, and they brought in new screenwriters who were the guys that did Crank and stuff like that with Jason Statham. And I still thought, well, good luck. You know, I have nothing to do with it. And then it turned out at the 11th hour that they used enough of my story, of my take on it, that was unique to me and not the comics.
Right.
That it was like, oh, we got to put Farmer's name back on it. So I get top story credit, even though it's no longer really my script.
Is that frustrating?
Yeah, I mean, it felt good. It's like, hey,
it's like a mixed blessing.
yeah, I got my name on a movie, but it's not really mine anymore.
And you're getting paid.
You got a shot of cash.
Yeah, I got some good cash. I got paid.
Cash,
Again, when I gotten paid years ago for the first part.
Did you feel a little, for lack of a better word, whorish?
Probably more when I was working on the thing than I did at that point. At that point, I was just glad to get some recognition for working on it because it had been a few years.
So you rationalize.
Yeah.
And
The one I felt whorish on was a thing called Sandman, which was based on a Neil Gaiman
Another
comic.
huge comic, yeah.
Yeah, which I was hired by Warner Brothers to write a draft of. And that was right after Jonah Hex. I mean, like just as I was writing Jonah Hex, as I was finishing the last draft of that, I was writing the first draft of Sandman. So it was like, oh, it's like, hey, I'm a hot property. I'm writing two scripts at once.
Right.
And I made the mistake of taking the advice of every executive that was, above me in the process of like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do this?
Story's a spider. We need
Exactly.
a giant spider.
Exactly. Well, the thing was this was like, to show you how long ago this was like right before 2000. So it was like the millennium. It's got to be based on the millennium. Something's got to happen when the clock strikes on January 31st, 1999.
Yeah.
And so the millennium was written into the thing, and it was just a big mess. And
Did Neil Gaiman have anything to do with this process?
I wanted to meet him, and the exact words. And there's a book floating around somewhere with a story of this. It's called Tales from Development Hell by a guy named David Hughes. And as I said in that book, I wanted to meet with Neil Gaiman, and the exact words of the studio execs were, we don't need to get him involved.
We don't need to get him involved.
Yeah. And then
we don't need to get the guy who wrote
created
American
it.
Gods.
Yeah,
we don't
exactly.
need the guy who's in that genre of literature is just amazingly huge.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
it's like, we don't need to get him involved.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But no, we don't actually need the guy that created it.
Right.
That'd be stupid.
Fuck
Yeah,
does he know?
exactly.
And what about him? I mean, did he just release it?
Well, I guess he released the rights
To
I
it?
mean, yeah, he plays into the whole debacle as well because there was a version of the script that turned out not even to be mine, ironically, that was leaked on Ain't It Cool News. I don't even know if those guys are around anymore. Harry Knowles.
They were pretty. They were big in the birth of the internet.
I think they may be gone now, but
They had an Angel Fire website.
well, there you go.
Ain't It Cool News? Not so cool anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, but no, at the time they were the go-to.
They got a hold of some version of the script that I don't think was mine. They trashed it. Neil Gaiman read that script and he trashed it. He said horrible things about me in print and all
About
this,
you?
about me personally. Yeah.
Wow.
And then
And it wasn't your copy. It wasn't your version.
From what I read on Ain't It Cool, it wasn't even my copy.
So,
but
your name was on it.
But to be honest, my copy sucked too because it was like, I made the mistake of letting it be studio driven,
Right.
rather than what I wanted to do.
But being a let's call it a neophyte in the business at that point, I mean, and you've got these high-powered executives saying, we want you to do this. You kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
I want the gig. I want to work.
Exactly.
All right. It's going against my better judgment. It's going against what I feel, but I want this job, so I'm going to do what I have to do.
Yeah.
How many of us have been in that situation where we've gone against the
Right,
grain
right.
and reluctantly done something that we didn't want to do because of the bigger picture down the line?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you could go back.
Oh, if I could go back, it's like, and I give this advice to anyone that asks for advice. It's like, if you're hired to do something, presumably you're hired because they think that you can do it better than they can, or they wouldn't hire you.
Right.
So stick to your guns. Hold your ground. Just if they come up with something stupid, just say, no, I think that's stupid. And just don't do it. You know what I mean? That would be my advice, and that's what I learned from that exercise. And to put a little button on the thing, I don't know if he got a hold of me through my agent, or I can't remember how it happened, but I remember at one point getting an email from Neil Gaiman more recently, like a few years back, just saying, I'm sorry I said all the bad things about you.
Oh, that's nice.
I read the next draft that the next person they hired wrote, and my God, it was worse than yours. And he's like, I see that it was like, just that's the way the studio wanted to go. That's not necessarily the way you wanted to go.
In the current landscape of these types of films where they're constantly rebooting and giving it another shot, has there been any talk about bringing back and doing Jonah Hex properly, or bringing back, Sandman and doing it properly, taking another shot at it and improving upon an inferior product? Because from what I heard through the rumor mill, if you will, is that your original take on Jonah Hex, what you wrote, was far superior than the stuff that made it to the big screen.
Well, if I may say so myself, it was awesome. It was so much better,
right?
Yeah.
So, would you go back and try to right those wrongs?
Oh, I would if given the chance. But the problem with Hollywood is they tend to like. It's like the same reason that Hillary's not going to run for president again.
Right.
It's like you lose once, they don't go back.
Been there, done that.
They're going to get somebody new. They're not going to go back and have everybody go, oh, that's the guy that wrote that version that nobody liked way back when. They're going to always move ahead.
But sometimes the version that nobody liked
was the good one.
Is the good one.
Yeah, that was the good one. Yeah.
So if there was somebody with half a brain and it's like, guys, this was the gold right here to begin with.
Yeah.
We walked right past it.
Yeah.
And then you would go back. So, but you're saying that's not the way it works.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely go back.
How it works
I would definitely go
Hollywood.
back if given the chance. I don't think on a project that failed that miserably as I think that film did, I don't think there would be any invitation to go back. I think if they ever tried to do it again, which I'm not sure they ever will, but if they tried to do it again, I think they would just pick a fresh young crew and do it again.
Yeah, don't say they won't go back because, well, especially Sandman. I mean that's still.
Well, they're still talking about trying to go back to that. That's been 20 years, 19 years now.
And they keep not going back because they just haven't stumbled across the.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can get a good handle on it. It's so esoteric. And that's not meant as a diss. It's just like it's so.
And that's in the DC world. It's much like the Silver Surfer. They don't know what to do with the Silver Surfer in the Marvel world without fucking it up.
Yeah.
So
it's like they tried to make Sandman, which was very ethereal and hard to nail down. They tried to make it into Batman, and that was the version I wrote where they basically, he was a superhero, which he was never intended to be.
Right.
And actually, the studio, of course, oddly enough, the way the studios are, they loved it. I mean, this thing was like in the pipe to get greenlit until the bad press hit of like, oh man, what the hell? And Neil Gaiman was going, oh man, this sucks, and they just kind of like sculpted away from it.
And when the bad press hits, where does the bad press come from? Does it come from the the true fans that somehow have gotten a hold of what it is and start to spread that word amongst the Sandman community?
Yeah. Well, a lot of this came from the true fans, but they hadn't read it all. They were just responding to what they had heard. Like some news blurb from Harry Knowles or something says, Farmer did this with Sandman, and they're like, what? That sucks. And it just grows as like a general angry villagers thing.
And how does that make you feel? I mean, what's that do to your confidence as a writer?
It pisses you off a little bit. It makes you. It didn't hurt my confidence because I knew. It's like actually when I was having a conversation with Neil Gaiman through emails about it, this is what I said to him. It's like I was hired to write or to paint this god-awful, ugly purple house. You can say that the house is ugly, but by God, I did a great job on that purple house.
Right.
And that's kind of the way I feel about Sandman. I did a great job in making Sandman the superhero movie they wanted it to be. Now, that sucked. That wasn't what it was supposed to be, and I can understand why everybody hated it, but... don't say I'm a lousy writer because I painted this purple house.
So your skin has gotten thicker through the years where you are oblivious or?
Yeah, I think a little
or-
bit. Yeah,
or-
I mean, I've worked on
or
a couple of
harsh criticism.
I've
doesn't
worked on a
affect
couple.
you as
Yeah, I've worked
much?
on a couple of projects since then where where I'll get the this doesn't make sense, and instead of going, yeah, you're right, let's do something else. I'll explain why it makes sense, and either you get it, or if you don't, then oh well, maybe this isn't the project we need to work on together.
All right, let me ask you this: if you were talking to a screenwriter who was wanting to get into the business right now, and he had to take one of two paths, feature films or television, which way would you tell him to go?
Right now, I would say television.
And why?
Well, because I've had my greatest success, even though the thing isn't made, it was never produced. I've had my greatest success, sort of feather in my cap that made me feel good through television.
And what was that?
It was a show that I created called Strangers a few years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, that sold to USA Network.
Sold.
Just flat out sold. Did not get produced. It's still, in their pocket.
It technically turnaround right now.
It's in turnaround. Yeah, there's another show.
Before you go into explain turnaround.
It's like when you sell a show or sell a property, there's some clause in the contract that says, it recognizes the fact that they can't hold on to it forever. It says like, okay, we have 2 years to make this show, and if we don't, you're free to sell it to somebody else.
Or they can buy the rights.
Or
again.
they could buy the rights back if they wanted to. Yeah.
So when you say this has been the most successful project, this is one that
Financially and just the personal pride of like I created something out of nothing and it sold.
and it's sold, and they're still hanging on to it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you still get paid.
Yeah. Well, not at this point, but I mean, it's at this point, it's probably reverted back to the original producers who are the umbrella company. It's a long story, but
Well, like I said, we
I,
got
I
time.
I don't own it anymore. Put
You
it
don't
that
own
way.
it
I don't own it.
But if it
anymore.
were to be produced and made into a series, you'd be back
I'm
in.
attached to it. Yeah.
You're
I'm
attached,
attached
to
the
it.
thing.
And would you write for it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You would
yeah.
continue to write for it.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Would you be showrunner or just the first?
I don't know
the
about
first
showrunner, but
writer?
I'm executive producer of it,
Yeah.
and I definitely have a say in where it would go. And the title would have to change because I understand there's another show now. I'm not sure what network it's on, but it's a completely different show that happens to be called Strangers on some other network.
And what was the premise of Strangers?
The premise of Strangers was it was a science fiction show, and
No, is
Is
a
a
science,
science fiction
is a
show.
science fiction show.
with crash cars.
with crash cars. Yeah.
This is like one of the best pitches ever. Just give us the elevator on this.
It's just so mind-numbingly simple that when I told it to all the executives and everybody, they just kind of like hit themselves in the head, like, wow, I could have had a V8 thing. It's like, wow, why isn't anybody doing this? There's a cataclysmic event in which every soul on Earth is just randomly ripped out and deposited in the wrong body. That's it. But think of the ramifications.
Oh my God! So
Suddenly, Dino Tripodis is a little old lady in Afghanistan. You don't know where your loved ones are. They're somebody else. You don't know anything, how to get to anybody. The world is falling apart because
I'm
the
in this
infrastructure's
body,
gone.
but I have
no,
the
no,
soul-
no, no. You're gone.
I'm gone.
You're in a little. You're yourself, but you're inside the body of a little old lady in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The bodies
Okay.
stay where
The
they
body
are.
stays where they are, but the
Everybody else is gone.
Consciousness is
Yeah,
moved.
consciousness has
different.
moved. So, and the main like personal thread that kept the series going is it's about a mother trying to find her son, a mother who is now a guy, because she's in the body of a guy in another country, and her son is now God knows where.
so the actor would be a guy, but the
playing a woman.
playing a woman.
Yeah, yeah.
And the same thing
Comedy
could apply.
or
no, no,
drama?
no,
It was
no,
dark
no,
drama?
no,
It was, well, it had comedy elements. I mean,
Sure.
there was actually humor in it, but it was more of just this gut wrenching. Where's my son? He could be anywhere on Earth
And
and
her-
look like anybody on Earth.
And her son could be embodied by somebody else as well.
Yeah, her son's body. In fact, she calls before the infrastructure falls apart. She calls his cell phone, and she gets a kid that sounds like him because it's his body, but he's speaking Swahili. Because it's not him.
Okay,
And-
so they're smacking their heads. They're doing the V8 thing.
yeah. Basically, we had every executive at USA behind it.
Except one.
We had the president of USA behind it,
Okay.
and the person he has to deal with, who is sort of the liaison between NBC, which is where the money is, and USA, was the one person who said, "I don't get it," and it killed it. It was just such crushing disappointment because we had literally, and I'm not exaggerating,
What is not to get?
we had about probably by the time the producers company and USA all got together and this thing was rolling, we probably had 15 high-level people on what they called Team Strangers.
And the director, you guys had the
And
director
the director,
for the
yeah,
pilot.
we had Johan Renck, who was one of the most sought-after directors around. I mean, look him up. R-E-N-C-K, Johan Renck.
Vikings or what?
Yeah, he's done just tons of stuff. And it's just like...
He's on board.
Yeah,
he's ready.
He's
to go.
on board. He's like, this is the most exciting thing I've ever read. I want to do this.
Wow.
You know, and it's like...
Tell them about the character, the serial killer character. Please tell them about the serial killer character.
There was one of the permutations of this thing that was going to become a plot thread is there was a serial killer, a really nasty, vicious, BTK kind of killer,
Right.
who was now in the body of like just a sweet-looking 12-year-old girl.
Oh my God! Oh, come on!
And
Come on!
And he didn't get it.
That's its own spinoff right there.
I got to be honest with you. If you're going like when you mentioned Sandman and the Millennium,
Yeah.
serial killers right now,
Yeah.
are kind of like the movie du jour or the plot line du jour.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they're it's a very popular genre right now to capitalize on. So I can't imagine that somebody who said we've got the soul of a serial killer in a 12-year-old girl. I mean, done. Make that.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
wouldn't watch that
I know,
and be
I know.
completely intrigued and also just beside themselves with the potential horror that could actually
God.
entail.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
incredible.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
awesome.
because that was the way the series was going to go. It's like basically the overall arc is the mother looking for her son,
Oh my God.
but week by week, episode by episode, it would be like dealing with these just weird permutations of just like what people have become now, and also trying to get the society back together. Trying to get the trains running,
Right.
Trying to get the
Sure.
planes flying, trying to get people back to where they're supposed to be. Because when this happens, boom, the planes fall out of the sky. Guys at the stick don't know how to fly a plane. And
one guy didn't get it.
one guy didn't get it.
I don't. That's all he said. I don't get it.
No, he got it. He didn't see the sustainability. He didn't see how it was going to go.
Would you consider that to be one of the single most greatest ideas you've ever had?
Yeah, that was one of those ideas. Yeah, when sometimes you have an idea and you think, yeah, that has a shot. When I had this idea, I thought, this is money in the bank. I don't even have to, you know what I mean? This is like one of those magic ideas where, I mean, nothing writes itself. There's a lot of hard work, but you know what I mean? You have that idea that you go, this fucking writes itself.
This one just pours out.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can do this. This writes itself. And it sold. It got everybody on board. I mean, everybody that read this was like, I'm on board. I'm on board.
So now what? So then they can at some point it's up for grabs again.
It's up for grabs again. So anybody that's listening, it's up for grabs.
Netflix.
But the thing of it is,
Netflix buys everything.
Yeah.
What's with Netflix?
they were the first people we took it to, and they turned it down because they had Sense8 at the
Okay.
time. You
All
remember
right.
Sense8
Yeah.
with some
Sci-fi,
people like
yeah,
switching
yeah,
consciousnesses or something?
yeah.
But I think Sense8 is gone.
It is gone.
Netflix,
It
it's
is
gone.
gone. It's gone.
You need another one.
It's gone. They need to put something else in
Yeah.
there.
But I mean, especially, the thing of it is, it's got to change the title, right? It can't be
All right.
Strangers anymore.
Okay.
Perfect
So
strangers.
the
Done.
perfect
That's been done. There'll be no bulky in this one.
the perfect title is now for these times. When you think about what's going on in our actual times and what's going on in the script, borderless, because you don't have Mexicans at the border in this script.
Right.
You have Mexicans right next to you. Maybe
Right.
you don't know. You don't know who anybody is. There's none of that crap applies anymore.
So in your gut, and
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've had to rely on your gut and your instincts over the course of your career.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still feel that this still has a shot, that it's going to show up somewhere, that it's still
I-
it's still your money in the bank?
I do.
That's
I don't.
gonna pay off.
Yeah, I don't think about it every day.
I
But
would
ev-
think about
but
it
ev-
every
but every
day.
once in a while, it pops into my head, and I think
I would think about it
this is-
every day.
Because there's two things, A and B. A, somebody's got to have this idea that it would be a great show. B, they can't do it because mine's already been seen by everybody in town. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's kind of like, yeah, someday I think this is gonna hit the tracks. But I we'll see. Yeah. But
And
I mean,
and then I mean, and then you can't just sit back and wait. You have to continue to produce. You have to continue to write.
Yeah, and I've been working on other things. I've worked on a few projects that haven't quite taken off. Things I'm working with because one of the producers, actually the first person to really champion Strangers was a producer named Christina Wayne, and if you look her up, she's got buku credits. She's done some great stuff. She said it was one of the greatest things she'd ever been involved with. And I bounce ideas off her. I send her stuff every once in a while, and we've tried to get something off the ground that hasn't worked. But no, I'm still at it, working on something right now.
Does it make you feel a little more confident, the fact when we speak about television, that there now are so many platforms available in order to get something out there? And is that also just as frustrating to think that there's so many platforms out there? Why isn't one of the things that I've written that's fucking awesome not out there when I see so much shit that's occupying the space that is out there?
Yeah, believe me, it's frustrating, And I've heard that same thing from all the various executives and producers that worked on Strangers. It's
So
the
why
most
is
frustrating thing in their careers that Strangers
and
didn't
why
get
is
off
the
ground.
shit getting out there and in your case some of the quality not?
I don't know. It's
That's a mystery.
It's a question. Yeah, I mean it's frustrating.
That was a rhetorical question.
I think the proliferation of television now. There's so many venues, but at the same time, it makes everybody want to jump on it. And speaking of Christina Wayne, I was reading a little interview with her the other day where she said, she goes to pitch a show, and there's George Clooney and Guillermo del Toro there to pitch shows.
They're pitching shows.
Yeah,
as well.
it's like it's the prize now, and it's like there's so many shows, there's so many slots on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and everything, but everybody wants them.
And everybody wants a piece of it. And I saw where Clooney and his people, they got the green light to do a little mini series on Catch 22. And when I first read that, I went, "Oh, that's kind of cool. That can be a limited series because there was so much in the Joseph Heller book that could be expanded upon." And I go, "That's kind of a great idea." But once again, they're mining stuff that's already existed and trying to either improve upon it or put a new twist on it, whatever the case might be. But as far as original stuff, there's not a whole lot of originality out there anymore.
No, there's not.
Does that make you crazy?
Yeah. I mean, I just watched my fiance and I just watched a thing on, I think it was Amazon, called ABC Murders. It was a Hercule Poirot thing starring John Malkovich, and I'm like, that's okay, but why is this on?
Yeah,
I mean, they don't have anything better to make a show out of.
And I saw that, and not my
Hercule Poirot,
and not my favorite, not my favorite performance of that particular. I'm a big mystery fan, but and I love Malkovich.
Yeah,
but that wasn't the smartest move, but that's got to be just maddening. So how do you deal with the frustration?
I just kind of go back to the idea that I wrote, it's like, to blow my own horn a little bit. The first TV series I ever tried to create sold to USA. So I must have something going on. I try to take that setback as like, okay, that's one guy. I can do it again. And I've been trying to do it again. Haven't nailed it yet, but I'll do it again.
Have you had that same feeling about anything since Strangers or Borderless that you feel very confident and excited about?
I feel pretty confident and excited about a lot of ideas. Not quite like that, where you just, as soon as it hits you in the head, you think that's money in the bank.
Yeah, and that one just, that one just
those,
started.
Those are one in 100 ideas. But I'll have 99 more, so I'll hit it.
A podcast host by day, a PI by night. We've got it.
No, that is me.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah, that would be real. That's and anything real's not going to sell.
Hey, tell them.
And there's dragons.
And there's dragons.
Right. That's right.
Oh man.
That's all right.
So, when you started, I want to go back a little bit to the beginning. What was the very first very first screenwriting project you worked on that actually was all Bill Farmer?
Well, I wrote this project way back when, like in the 90s, before moving to LA, before any of this. It was a thing called Quivera that I entered into a competition. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the Nichols Fellowship.
Yes.
It's a screenwriting.
Well, I don't know if they're familiar with it, but I am, yes.
It's a screenwriting competition. It became a finalist, and then it became a semi-finalist, and it didn't win the competition, but it got me an agent, and it got me my first Hollywood job, which was the Jonah Hex job, because somebody read Quivera and said, it's a supernatural Western. This guy can write Jonah Hex. And this producer contacted me. We talked about it a little bit over the phone. He liked what I had to say about Jonah Hex, flew me out there from Columbus. I still lived in Columbus. We pitched the project to the executives of Warner Brothers. I flew back and then got the call. You got it. You got Jonah Hex. You're the guy. You're going to do it.
How much time do you spend out in Los Angeles in order to kind of move things along? Do you only go out there when necessary?
At this point, yeah. I mean, I lived out there for a number of years after Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex brought me out there. And the interesting thing, when you speak of the first project, that Quivera script, that script probably paid my rent for like 6 years.
Wow.
Because it was one of those weird projects where everybody that read it was drawn in and fascinated by it. They're like, oh man, there's something here. But they all wanted to change it. And they all were in a position to pay me to change it. So I was like, okay, I'll change it.
I'll change it.
And,
I'll fix it.
And this,
I want to keep living here.
This thing, I mean, this script, literally, I'm not exaggerating, it kept me going for like 6 years. We had Angelina Jolie was going to be the star.
What was the basic premise, if you don't mind me asking?
It was that changed over the years too, but it was basically like a fantasy fairy tale of like this woman on horseback that was a bounty hunter, again, which got me the Jonah Hex job because he's a bounty hunter.
Right.
And she was looking for this psycho that was killing people all through the territory, but it turned out that the psycho was under the influence of a powerful person who was having him kill people for a reason.
Okay.
So it's a little more complicated than that, but we'll leave it at that. And at one point, it was a female lead, and a lot of women were interested in it. Angelina Jolie was going to do it. Lucy Liu was going to do it. Mila Jovovich was going to do it.
And what year is this?
Late 90s.
Because right now,
Yeah.
with the woman,
Yeah, any of them could do it, but
any could, I
now
can't
they don't
imagine
want to do it.
They would just jump at that now in order to have a strong female doing it.
Right after Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
Right.
Zhang Ziyi was huge. She was going to do it.
Cool.
Yeah, everybody was going to do it. I mean, there's a few more I can't even remember, but it never got done because everybody just changed it into some direction that somebody didn't like it, and it went back and forth. Then at one point, after all that was done, George Romero, Night of the Living Dead, George Romero.
God rest his soul.
Yep, got a hold of it. He wanted to do it. So I was having meetings with George Romero.
Did he want to put some zombies in it, man?
Yeah, he wanted to make it more supernatural
Yeah.
than it already was, yeah. So he wanted to do it. He took it and wrote a version of it. We had an understanding. He would take my script, write it to make it his, then I would take it back and put a polish on it so that it didn't bastardize it too much.
Shine it
You know
up
what I
a
mean? Yeah,
little.
make it more of what I originally envisioned. And we did that over, I mean,
So you had a working relationship with George Romero.
yeah, for a while. And bless his, we're talking about whiskey tonight. Bless his heart. The man drank tumblers. Not glasses like this, tumblers of whiskey.
I knew I respected him for an unknown
Yeah.
reason. and I
That's
didn't
it.
know why.
But so
Good man.
we finally wound up with a version of it that we both liked, and he couldn't get arrested at that point. It was just a point, it was like the Living Dead films at that point had died out. They hadn't started making the more modern sequels.
right.
It was, and he finally got a job. He was able to do the film Bruiser. Remember Bruiser?
Mm-hmm.
So this is right around the time period we're talking about. It's like I was working with him right before he did Bruiser. And so, I mean, we're talking about the same script that had all these weird women attached, and then George Romero's attached. And during George Romero's part of it, and this is part of what I think killed it, he wanted, there was the main female lead, and then there was a guy who was just known as the gentleman. Nobody had names in it. It was a very, like, surreal script where nobody had a name. The gentleman was going to be Ed Harris. Ed Harris was attached. I mean, firmly attached. He's like, George is in, I'm in. So we thought, great. But then Ed Harris's condition was that Amy Madigan, his wife, be the female lead. And that killed it.
And that killed it.
I mean, I love Amy Madigan. She's great. But that killed it at every juncture.
But
it's
just hearing, I love Amy Madigan as well,
Yeah.
but just hearing you describe what that movie was about, that's not one of the top names that pops up as far as being
right. Yeah.
the person in that role.
Yeah. Exactly. But that was Ed's condition.
Ed Harris in Westworld right now kind of reminds me
Exactly.
of that,
Exactly.
of that role.
I know.
Yeah.
The first time I saw that, I was like, "That's him."
Yeah.
Man.
He looks just like that's him.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
envision
yeah.
it.
It pissed me off. It's like that's him.
Was it like,
So-
this one's for you, Bill.
So do you
Roll camera.
in the back of your mind, do you sometimes think that that's a project that might resurface again and do something?
Well, you know what I think about that one? When I originally wrote that one, I didn't write it to enter it into the competition. I wrote it with the intention that a friend of mine and I were going to go down to Athens, Ohio, get a couple of horses, and film the thing.
And shoot it.
Was this
Yeah.
Mark?
Mark,
Yeah.
Mark Person. And if I ever had anything to do with that again, it would be that. I would leave all the other versions behind. I mean, you should see, I've still got these on my various computers and hard drives. There's like, no exaggeration, there's probably 26, 27 drafts of Guevara, and they are all fundamentally different. They're not just like tweaks. It's like, oh, this is the version where this person was the hero.
Isn't that
Oh, this
maddening?
is the,
Isn't that
but I was
maddening on
getting
some
paid.
level?
I was getting paid, and it's like I needed to get paid at that point. It's like I need
Oh, well, you
this
got paid
money,
for 6 years.
Yeah, I got paid for a long time on Guevara.
I have a question, though.
But there's so many versions of that film. It started out as a bunch of people on horses, like something you could shoot for
Sure.
a nickel. By the end, they were robotic horses.
Oh.
There were spaceships. There were domed cities.
Asbury,
I
say
swear-
it.
I
Crash
swear.
cars.
Crash
Yeah,
car.
there were crash cars.
You saw me clicking, man.
It's like by the end it was Star Wars, and it's like that. It's like a weird irony that you get caught in with a project like that. It's like it had something that fascinated everybody, yet they said, "I don't think anybody else will get it. Let's change it a little bit to make it more." And then in the end, it becomes, it's just another fill in the blank. You know what I mean? It's like they try to. It's like, you create a square peg, they try to put it in a round hole, and by the time you whittle it down, it's like, great, it's a round peg now, but the magic was in the square peg.
Right.
That's very frustrating.
Do you think if Angelina Jolie would read it today, given the way Hollywood is today when it comes to female leads and female-driven films, fresh out of the gate, would have read that first draft, would it be made today?
Probably.
Yeah. So why doesn't
Yes.
do you have an agent?
Yeah.
So why don't you ever say to your agent, hey, why don't you push that one right now, or what? I mean,
Look what I just
yeah. You know what?
do it, freshen up the draft and put new.
I mean,
Yeah.
if something was
Yeah.
good back then and paid you for 6 years and then falls to the wayside a little bit, I mean, who's to say that this gem that existed can't resurface now and become a new entity?
No, I agree, but I guess I mean, obviously I have people that are behind it like that, but at the same time, I'm sort of like, I want to move on. You know what I mean? It's like I want, it'll be great if something happened with that someday. Excuse me.
Well,
it'd be
can't you
great.
just throw it out there while you're working on moving on?
Yeah.
I'm moving on, but hey, while I'm moving on, throw this one back out
Look at
there
this,
and
yeah.
see what happens.
Are you afraid you're going to get back in the trap of people saying, "This is great. Well, how about this?
Oh, yeah.
Donkeys, not horses."
Exactly.
Donkeys.
Yeah, I think well, in the case of something like Sandman, yeah, I do want it thrown. I mean, I'm sorry, not Sandman. I don't know why I said that. Freudian slip. In the case of something like Strangers, I
Yeah.
do want it thrown back out there because I
Yeah.
think it's timely. I think it's
Sure.
it's right on the button. I think it needs to be done. With the case of something like Kivera, I worked on that for so long and made it into what other people wanted for so long. My only back of the head dream about Kivera is I'll make that myself someday.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna mess with
Yeah.
other people trying to figure
Passion
that one
project.
out. I'll just do that. Yeah.
All right. So
So that one I don't push anymore.
as we get close to wrapping up here, Johnny, first of all, being a writer and director as well, do you have any questions for Bill that I might have missed in the process of this conversation? Which is why we put a microphone on you tonight. Is
No.
there-
It's all been going good.
Yeah,
I've
covered-
been chiming in every once in a while.
No, and I'm glad
really
you
for,
are
like,
because I
bad
we should talk
comments.
about your film a little bit that
Oh.
I worked on a tiny bit.
no the street
The
where we
Street Where
live.
We
Live? Yeah,
No, worked on a little bit. You
Yeah.
added an element to our
Yeah.
script that we can't thank you enough for.
So what Bill's referring to is that we did a film called The Street Where We Live, and Dino and I worked on the first, basically the practical draft where we started shooting.
Right.
And we went into production knowing that the ending sucked.
The ending sucked. It
And-
was a little too hallmarky.
Yeah.
It was a little too tied up in a too nice of a fucking bow. No, we didn't care for it. Neither one of us. But we also didn't have an out.
Right, and then I had no ideas, and then we approached Bill to look at the script that we had, and I redlined the things that we had already shot. Remember that? And I said, "How
Don't
can we
change
fix
You can't
this?
change these. Yeah.
How can we fix this?" And Bill came up with basically he rewrote about 30 pages maybe,
Maybe. Yeah.
and added a little bit here and
Yeah,
there, and
yeah.
Added a scene which
Yeah.
in the film has become one of my favorite scenes when Christina Koff, our lead actress, Mary goes to interview for a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a job that she thinks is in her wheelhouse of something to do, and then finds out that she's horribly underqualified for it. That's one of my favorite scenes in the film, and that was all you.
Yeah, that was. It's like I read the script. I liked the script. I thought it had a lot to say. I thought it needed to be more painful.
Yeah,
You know, it's
yeah.
like so it's like I undertook another
fault.
draft.
And that moment, painful's the right word.
Yeah.
It's like
because that moment where Christina
Yeah.
is listening to this woman babble on about
Yeah.
insurance and
Yeah.
and so forth and so on, the look on Christina's face, credit to John Whitney for capturing that, is so remarkably
Yeah.
like you feel
Painful.
so bad for her
Yeah.
without her saying a word
Yeah.
while she's just listening to this insurance babble for a job that she knows that
She's not gonna get it.
not gonna get
Yeah,
not
right.
gonna get it's one of my favorite scenes in the
Yeah.
film, and that's to your credit.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to make it more like. I thought it hit hard, but at any juncture I found to make it hit harder and hurt worse is what I wanted to do, because I thought the whole point of a film like that. I mean, of course, you want a happy ending in a conventional story, but in a story where you're dealing with a social ill and something that's actually going on in the world today, you want people to kind of walk out a little bit mad, a little bit
and
pissed off.
People
like,
walked out
like,
of
I
our
can't-
film
You know,
talking about what they thought would happen next to these characters.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
And that was a great ending for us.
Is that like there would be some hope, but it could go really bad.
it could
too.
go. It could still go badly.
Yeah,
So
it went from what I used to describe as she got a job and cue Katrina and the Waves walking on sunshine to very kind of like not really dark, but with a hopeful lining at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I thought
It's
that
like
was.
that. It's like she's at the abyss. She doesn't know what's down there. She'll jump in. Maybe it'll be waters that aren't quite as deep as she thinks.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it works.
Yeah. Well, it's like I can remember being. What's the movie? And somebody remind me of the title. It's the movie where Robert De Niro plays a filmmaker who's blacklisted by the McCarthy thing. Do you know that movie?
yeah, I know that movie.
But it has this ending where he just goes off on the committee and he goes off on everybody and everything's this was the end of the McCarthy era and it's all happy ending. And I was so pissed off at the end of that movie because I'm like, you shouldn't have a happy ending in a movie like this. You should walk out mad. the guy should be destroyed, and you walk out mad. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I wanted to do with John's film. It's like I want you to walk out like not feeling quite this good.
And it worked because
it
at
did
some
work.
festival screenings, I had people come up to me and go, and one woman in particular says, "You wrote this movie is exactly what has happened to me.
Exactly. Yeah, we had a lot of single moms.
This woman is me."
that
And it was actually pretty powerful, and just like because they had no hope and they had no idea. They took steps that they had no idea where they was going to take them, and they identified it really. It was pretty heavy, man. There's people crying at our screenings. Dude.
Yeah, the street where we live is currently being shopped as we speak.
Yeah.
And we're getting close to some sort of.
We'll make an announcement at some point.
At
in the
some
next
point,
month or
but,
so. But
and
I don't
then-
want to. We don't want to make announcements unless we've sold something.
Let me say, yeah. And in the meantime, as you keep on working on things, John and I are working on things, and I'll say it on the podcast now. We have every intention of totally taking advantage of you and bringing you in on something.
I'm here.
Before we start writing the script,
Give me whiskey.
as opposed to
Give me
after.
whiskey.
It's a cheap date, right?
Should we bring in Bill Farmer to actually because we have a treatment written and we're like let's bring in Bill to get some thoughts on this before we actually start writing the script instead of after.
Yeah.
Yeah, no more cleanup for Bill Farmer.
Yeah,
he
yeah,
needs to
yeah,
be
yeah.
kind of involved a little bit.
In closing, I find these master classes online. Steve Martin has one for stand-up comedy, and then I see one for writers as well. James Patterson has a master class. I just recently saw one for Aaron Sorkin, where if you pay X amount of dollars and you get this tutorial from these greats in the business. James Patterson, you can't argue his success. Aaron Sorkin, you certainly can't argue his success, both in films and now on Broadway with To Kill a Mockingbird. So let's make this last segment a teaching moment, if you will. What would be your advice to an aspiring screenwriter right now?
Right now. I would say, and all these kind of books that you read on screenwriting that tell you that you have to do this and you have to do that and you have to structure it this way. That's all valid information. But my advice is always go with your gut first. Just write what you want to write, get the raw material out there, make it yours, make it your unique voice, and then let the other people up the chain, the producers, whoever that read it, say, "Oh, this needs to be structured this way." Let them put it into a box. Don't put it into a box from the beginning. You know what I mean? Because so often I think we try to put it into a box from the beginning. We read Sid Field and we read Robert McKee and we read all this stuff and we go, "Okay, I got a great idea. How do I structure the A story, the B story, the C story?"
I'm going to save the cat.
Exactly. I do like Save the Cat. That's my only screenwriting book that I do like. But I think we put that on ourselves
Save
too
the
early.
cat.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Oh, have you ever seen what's Bullet to the Head, the Sylvester Stallone movie?
Yeah.
I laughed so hard. There's a scene in that movie at the beginning where it's supposed to be. They're driving down the road, and he's a hitman, and he's got his fellow hitman or whatever with him, and he goes, "Watch out for that cat."
Oh, yeah.
Save the
And
cat.
it's like,
Perfect.
talk about just like the ultimate in joke.
Self-aware.
They read that.
Absolutely.
You know they
And he
put that in
saves
there.
the cat.
He literally dodged the cat on the road.
That's awesome.
But but anyway, back to what you were asking. It's like all that stuff, all the structure, all the stuff that people try to teach you. That's great later. First step, put your heart on the paper, on the script, on the file, whatever.
Yeah.
And then whittle that down into like the proper format. Don't start with the format first. It's like if you're making a sculpture, there's two ways to do it. You can start with a lump of clay or wood or rock or whatever and whittle it into something great.
Right.
Or you can start with a mold and pour plaster into the mold. Don't start with the mold.
Don't start with the mold.
Don't start with the Robert McKee and the Sid Field and all that. That can come later. Write what's in your gut. Write whatever you feel like writing. Don't worry about if it's too long, too short, doesn't make sense, doesn't structure. Write that blob of stuff, and then that's your clay. then apply Sid Field and Robert McKee and all that to what you've got, because you'll have things in there that you wouldn't have had if you had just started with Sid Field,
followed with the mold,
and started with the mold.
Imported the mold.
And
You're
so-
going to lose some of the passion,
Just
some of the.
just write the bullshit, if I can say bullshit.
You
I
can
don't-
say
I
whatever
guess
you
we're
want
a-
on this.
we're-
Yeah,
we're a-
yeah.
we're a
Yeah,
Nazi
a lot of
something.
sculptors say that when they look at a piece of rock, it's what they pull away is how they discover the shape of whatever their sculptor is going to be.
Yeah.
So they have no clue what it's going to be looking at just the rock.
Yeah.
But as they tear it away, that's when they discover what the story is.
And I think when
which
we
is
see so many
sculpture.
movies and TV shows and now,
Yeah.
and they're just so by the numbers, and that was starting with the format and pouring in the material. You know what I
Afterwards.
mean? It's like, we've all seen The Cop, who's investigating a kidnapping of a kid, and then we see, years ago, he investigated the kidnapping of a kid, but he fucked up and the kid died.
Yeah.
And it was
Now
his son.
And now this is a chance to redeem himself. And as soon as you see that, you're just like, yeah, they started with the mold.
After
You
he
know,
saves the cat.
Yeah, they started with Sid Field, And it's like, start with your gut. Just pour it all out there. Don't worry about any of that stuff. And then in the second draft, worry about that stuff.
Worry about it then.
Because you do have to have that stuff.
Yeah.
You do have to have, quote unquote, the formula. But give yourself some raw material first. Don't just lay out the formula first and then try to put your material into it.
Because it's going to be
boring.
It's going to be formulaic.
Yeah, and it might sell because people love formulas. Studio executives don't know anything but formula. They see it and they go, "Oh, this fits the formula, buy it." But it's going to be crap. And it's like, do you want to write crap and get paid? I mean, sometimes, yeah. I mean, I've written crap and gotten paid, but try to pour your heart and soul out there first.
Well, my friend, continued success with everything that you do. Our guest has been Bill Farmer, William Farmer. Our guest bottle has been Heaven Hill, William Faulkner's go-to whiskey. And I just thought, once again, whenever a little serendipity can show up on Whiskey Business, I like it. Apparently, we didn't hate it. there's not that much left.
No, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's good.
I call it the Corona of whiskeys.
It is the Corona.
It's like it's there, it doesn't hurt, it's okay.
Little
On a
lime
selfish
twist.
note, I still, in my heart of hearts, if we ever get any money, I want to make Star and Snowman.
Sulfurex.
Steubenville.
Sulfurex, Steubenville, whatever the case might be.
They all start with S's, so there must be something going on there.
Yeah, because I think as much as I was ready to play Frank back then, I think I'm even more ready now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, even more.
You're
You're
Frankier by the day.
Oh, I'm getting Frankier by the moment. Like I said, our guest has been Bill Farmer. Hansberry, a couple of closing notes before we head home.
Yep. Whiskey Business. This is much more than a podcast. It's a movie on YouTube. Subscribe, Whiskey Business with Dino Tripodis. We're on Twitter, Whiskey Biz Show, Facebook, Instagram. But also, I wanted to read a review.
Sure.
On iTunes, we ask you to write.
We love
rate
reviews
and rate us. We got a 5-star from Firewalls and Dragons. He says, or she, well done, Dino and crew. The podcast just keeps getting better.
Oh, nice.
I love the humor and insights and the candor you bring to the conversation. Your tips on affordable good bourbon is a huge bonus.
Exactly.
Well, we try to give something
$13
something to everybody. Yeah, $13 a
Thank
bottle.
you. Rate and review us.
Stick with what's
Please,
on iTunes,
please talk
please.
about Game of Thrones a little bit more.
Well, we got a lot of hashtags on this one. I think coming up. Whiskey Business is a Never the Luck production, produced on the audio side. Whoops! It's the first time I've hit the boom
You did
mic.
good tonight.
Hansberry's trying to get me accustomed to the boom mic.
Tonight or in your career?
It just in my whole career.
Whoa.
My whole career.
I was witness to that. I saw that. Awesome.
He's been trying forever to get me to be a real broadcaster.
One of these days.
Produced wonderfully on the audio side by Greg Hansberry. Produced on the video side on our YouTube channel by the great John Whitney. There he is. Is there a cat? Is that a cat? Is that a cat?
It's Juno, brother.
So thank you to both of those gentlemen. Thank you to Bill Farmer as well,
welcome.
man. Like I
Pleasure
said,
to be
continued
here.
success, and I'm looking forward to working with you on something down the line. Hopefully, we get you before you skyrocket and can't remember.
Well, if I
who we
skyrocket, trust me, I'll come back for you. No, seriously,
are. Come back.
Yeah, I'll come back.
My name is Dino Tripodis, and so, my friends, until the next bottle, see ya. Oh, great podcast.